This video is a complete guide to my most popular plugin, ZOOMS for Final Cut Pro. I'm going to show you everything from the installation process to how to use every single tool, plus some powerful tips and tricks, as well as troubleshooting some of the most commonly asked questions. And if you don't have ZOOMS, I have a link as well as a discount code down below. When you first download ZOOMS, it's going to be just a zip file like this. Go ahead and unzip that folder. Then opening that folder, you'll need to locate your movies folder. If you don't have the movies folder, go up to Finder, go to Settings, then go to Sidebar, then locate movies. Make sure this checkbox is enabled, then you can close this out. Once you have your movies folder enabled, go ahead and locate your motion templates folder. If you don't have a motion templates folder, go ahead and right click, create new folder, then type motion templates. After that, right click on it, then select get info. Locating the name and extension, go ahead and type .localized. It's extremely important that this is not capitalized. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and push enter. Once you have the motion templates folder created, go ahead and jump inside and create a new folder called titles, then one more called effects. It's extremely important that these are capitalized exactly as they are in my video. From there, we can then again right click, select get info, and then type .localized. And we'll do the same thing for titles. We'll right click, get info, then type .localized. If you already have these folders, then you don't need to follow those steps. Once we have these folders set up, go ahead and reopen that FCB's ZOOMS folder and locate the effects. Double clicking to open it, click and drag the effects version over to the effects folder that we just created inside of motion templates. Then we can go ahead and back out, open the titles folder and do the exact same thing. We'll just drag this directly into titles. Once you've done that, you should have ZOOMS installed inside of Final Cut Pro. Now that ZOOMS installed, go ahead and open up Final Cut Pro. From here, you will locate ZOOMS in two different locations. One is to go over to your titles, then you can locate FCB's ZOOMS inside of your titles category. You can also locate ZOOMS over here under your effects panel, and you'll see ZOOMS here. There are multiple reasons why you might want to use either the effects version or the title version, which I will cover later in this video. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to use ZOOMS. Going up to my titles, I'll go ahead and click and drag ZOOMS down directly onto the timeline, and that will give me this purple title, which indicates that we will be zooming in and then we will be zooming out. If you look at your viewer, you'll notice that we have this large rectangle. To move around ZOOMS, click and drag this rectangle to wherever you want to zoom in. So if I want to zoom in closer on his face, I'll just drag that directly over his face. If I want to zoom in closer, we can go up to one of the corners and then click and drag to shrink the box down. This is giving us a preview of what our zoom level will be. If we push play, we can see that we zoom all the way in on his face. You'll also notice in the bottom left-hand corner this rotation panel. If I rotate this and push play, you'll see that the entire video image rotates on its axis. Then at the end, it goes back to exactly how it was. If you need to, you can click and drag the rotation panel around to a different section if it happens to be getting in your way. ZOOMS is going to last however long we have set up this title. So in this example, it's going to last for 10 seconds. If I want to shorten down the length, I can go ahead and click and drag one of the edges to shorten that down. It will start exactly wherever the beginning of the title is and go to where the end of the title is. Now that I have my zoom set up to where I want it to on the screen, we have some additional options we can cover over here on the right hand side. Making sure you're in the title inspector, you'll see that we have first our animation settings. We can of course disable the built-in animation, which means we will already be zoomed in at the start of this title. This is great for applying jump cuts, or if you have a scene where you want to start off zoomed in and then slowly zoom out at the end, you can of course disable that. You can also do the exact same thing with the build out animation. If you want it to just be a hard cut from the zoom out, we can go ahead and push play and that will just jump back to its original position. Underneath that is the scale lock. This is important if you want to retain as much resolution as possible. So for example, if you're using 4K footage on a 1080p timeline, you can typically zoom up to 200% without any resolution lost. If you want to make sure that you don't go beyond those zoom levels, you can go ahead and set the scale lock to something like 200%. If you want to be even more careful and conservative, you could set it over to 150%. What that does is it locks our preview square from getting any smaller than the 150% mark. Underneath that is the speed setting. If you want the zoom to happen over a faster period of time, we can go ahead and set this value down to the left. Now when we push play, it'll happen over 0.47 seconds. Or you can also set it to be up to 2 seconds long, specifically with our Pro Zoom. Underneath that is the position settings. This is super helpful if you don't feel like clicking and dragging directly on the screen, which is my preferred method. If you like to have specific number values, you can set those right here. A lot of people try and use this with keyframes. ProZooms is not designed to work with keyframes inside of Final Cut Pro, so do not use keyframes here, it's just not going to work. I will show you later how you can readjust the position by using Pro Pan. Underneath that is our rotation settings, which we dialed in earlier by using the rotation slider down here in the bottom left, but you can of course get specific values by using the rotation right here in this box. Underneath that is the easing. Currently it's set to ease both, which is my preferred way to have the zoom set to. What you can do though is change it over to something like constant, and we'll set both of these to constant. And if we push play, you'll notice that the zoom comes to a sudden stop at the very end. It will do the exact same thing zooming out, where it's just a sudden start. The next setting is the onion skin setting. I'll go ahead and enable that, and that will show us where the original video was sitting at, as well as the new video, which is zoomed in. This is extremely helpful for when you're working with interview clips and you want to do a jump cut, because now you can very specifically see exactly where to line up the eyes. It's very important when you do a jump cut to line up the eyes for a really natural looking zoom. This can help the viewer find the speaker on the screen more quickly, and it helps the cuts to be more hidden. You can of course dial in the opacity on this slider so that if you need to see more of the original layer or more of the zoomed layer, just click and drag that opacity slider. You can also change the blend mode, so I'll change it from normal over to something like difference. And now I have an interesting effect with this zoom that you might want to use, but this can also be helpful with lining up two specific shots. Underneath the onion skinning tool is the sharpening tools. These are extremely powerful because the sharpening is applied over the duration of the animation. That way you don't suddenly have super sharp footage on your timeline. To enable it, go ahead and just click on this box. Then underneath that, we have a whole bunch of settings to dial it in. For example, we can bring up the radius and the amount and the threshold, and you'll see how that's providing us with a nice natural sharpening on our footage. Here it is without, and here it is with. It can be very subtle, but it can go a long way to improve the resolution of your video if you happen to have to go beyond that 200% point. So that is an overview of how to use Pro Zooms, but what if you want to pan after you've zoomed in on your footage? That is where Pro Pan comes into play.
Turn up the heat with the Pro Man Pan. Get cooking, good looking.
If you need to change positions of your zoomed layer, click and drag Pro Pan down onto your timeline. It's extremely important that you set Pro Pan to be underneath Pro Zooms. Otherwise, you're going to get black edges as you pan across your footage. With Pro Pan selected, you'll notice that I have a small reticle here, which I can click and drag to adjust the final destination. It's important that you've moved your playhead beyond the animation point to get an idea of your final position. For example, if I wanted to zoom in to the bottom right hand corner, I could click and drag this Pro Pan down to the bottom right hand corner, and we could find this outer radius, which we can click to zoom in or to zoom out. So if I want to zoom in on these lovely plants, we could do just that. The Pro Pan animation is going to begin right as the Pro Pan title appears on the timeline. So we have this lovely zoom onto his face, and then we can go down to the bottom right hand corner. Then of course, if we want to zoom out, we can bring the Pro Pan to be quite a bit shorter, and it will go back to its original position. So we go to the bottom right hand corner, then back up to his face. Now, something that is super important is if you want to go back to the original scale of the video, then you're going to need to set your Pro Pan and Pro Zoom to end at the same time. But even more importantly, you're going to want to make sure that your Pro Pan is the same duration as Pro Zooms. Otherwise, you're going to get some weird wobbling, and sometimes you'll get some black edges. So for example, my Pro Zooms is set to 2 seconds in duration, whereas my Pro Pan is set to only 1.17. So if I push play, notice the slight wobble that happens on the zoom out. So if you want it to look as smooth as possible, go ahead and set your speed to the exact same values and everything will look great. The next tool that comes with Pro Zooms is Pro Burns. This is super powerful if you have a zoom that needs to go beyond 2 seconds. To apply Pro Burns, go ahead and just click and drag that down onto your timeline. This zoom is going to be applied across the entire duration of the Pro Burns title. It's going to be a much slower zoom happening here. You'll notice that if I shorten this title, the zoom is much faster. Pro Burns comes with all of the same benefits of Pro Zoom. I can go ahead and click and drag this directly over his face. We can shrink it down. It has all of the same options over here on the right hand side. Plus the sharpening is going to be slowly applied over the entire duration of the zoom, just like with Pro Zooms. However, there are a couple extra options that Pro Burns has. For example, if we wanted this zoom to only happen over a second or so in duration, we could change the zoom duration by using this slider. Currently it's set to 100%, which is the entire duration of the title, but maybe we only want it to last 10% of that. We'll go ahead and type that in, and if we push play, the zoom is much faster, and you'll notice that the zoom stays locked in at the very end. Unfortunately, you cannot animate it coming back out unless we were to create a cut inside of our Pro Burns. And going up to the top right, we need to go ahead and select reverse. By doing that, we've now reversed the animation that happened in the previous title. So if I push play, now I can go ahead and zoom out. Typically, you'll want to use Pro Zooms if you're doing this sort of animation, but you do have the capability if you so need with Pro Burns. Additionally, with Pro Burns, if you need to have a slow pan over to the right hand side that lasts for the entire duration of the title, you can go ahead and use Pro Burns pan to achieve just that. Again, you'll need to apply this directly underneath Pro Burns to achieve that. Pro Burns pan is going to work just like Pro Burns, but also like Pro Pan. I can go ahead and slide the end value over here to the right hand side, and we'll just have a nice slow pan to the right. So that is how to use all the tools that come with Pro Zooms, but you may have noticed that you have both a title version and an effects version. What is the difference between these? The title version is going to zoom everything that is underneath it inside of the timeline. For example, I can bring Pro Zooms down here, and if I had a title underneath this, I'll drag that custom title down below, you'll notice that the zoom animation is happening on both layers. With the effects version, we can apply it onto a single layer. I'll just go ahead, click and drag the effects version directly onto the shot, and now only this layer is going to receive that zoom. If I had a title above it, that title would not be affected. The effects version does come with a few additional bonuses. For example, we can use a shape layer on this zoom. So if there was something specific in your shot that you wanted to call out, we can go ahead and select our Pro Zoom and find the shape mask tool. We'll select add shape mask. We could go ahead and shrink down the feathering on this, and maybe we want to zoom in directly on his lamp here to the left hand side. Now, if we play out the animation, you'll notice that we have that zoom taking place, but additionally, we could select that. We'll push done with our Pro Zoom shape mask, and I can slide this over so that we're getting just that lamp. So now we can call attention directly to that lamp by using Pro Zoom and a shape mask. One other benefit that comes with using the effects version is it works throughout transitions. Let's say I have a cross dissolve between these two shots here. If I have Pro Zoom down on the timeline and it ends directly over this cut, maybe I don't have the build out animation. Now, if I push play, you'll notice that we start zoomed on this secondary shot. So we have this sudden jump cut back to its original position. Now you could, of course, use the build out animation if you wanted to, and that's kind of a nice effect, but sometimes you don't need that for a specific shot. So in this instance, you would want to use the Pro Zoom's effects version, and now that zoom will only take place on the first shot. One other benefit with Pro Zooms is it comes with a vertical edition of the plugin all included. If you need to work with vertical video and you want to apply some zooms, go ahead and scroll down to the bottom. Down here you'll see that you have both a Pro Zoom square as well as a Pro Zoom vertical, and this also works with the Pro Burns. I can go ahead and click and drag Pro Zoom vertical down on the timeline. Maybe I'll zoom in to the end of the animation and I can just move this up to where I am happy with it. You also have the ability to rotate it if you need to. All of those same settings apply to the vertical version. So hopefully you can see the sheer power of Pro Zooms and you can use this to really make your videos that much better. However, with any plugin, there is always going to be bugs and troubleshooting problems. So the next part of this video is to troubleshoot those specific issues that I see frequently pop up in emails. With the ProZooms vertical, there have been known bugs, and so I want to address some of those issues to hopefully get you up and running. A problem that frequently happens that I have been unable to replicate is sometimes on export, Final Cut Pro will flip the image with the ProZooms. I have no idea why. I think it's specifically a bug with how Final Cut Pro deals with Apple Motion templates, but I'm not quite sure. That said, if you run into this issue, there are a couple things you can try. The first and easiest method is to go ahead and select both the ProZoom and the underlying shot, right click and select new compound clip. This will of course create a compound clip of that zoom, and sometimes this addresses the issue. Another possible fix is to go ahead and use the effects version of the zoom. So go ahead and apply that onto your clip just like so, get it roughly back into position how you wanted it, and sometimes that resolves that issue. Another option you can try is just using the regular ProZooms tool down on your timeline. However, you'll notice that with that, when I push play, everything zooms out. You're gonna need to go ahead and readjust this by clicking and dragging and zooming on the corner until you get back to a nice vertical shape. Those are the 3 best methods I know for troubleshooting that particular issue. The next issue that I see frequently pop up in emails is when people are trying to do zoom, it plays out and then it randomly jump cuts back as it's zooming out. The issue with this is that your zoom needs to be roughly around 3.5 seconds long for this to not happen. That is because I've set it up so your zoom can last up to 2 seconds, and with the way that Apple Motion templates work, it needs that intro and outro time for that issue to not occur. If you do run into the issue where you need to get a zoom that is much shorter than that 3.5 second mark, you'll first want to go ahead and select that zoom, then go up to the top right hand corner and go ahead and disable the build out. From there, find the point where you want to zoom out and go ahead and push Command B to create a cut on your ProZooms. Selecting that secondary layer, go ahead and disable the build-in animation and then enable the build-out animation. This will resolve that issue and allow you to set your zooms to the exact levels that you need. The last issue that I constantly receive emails about is typically on a 1080p timeline, the footage looks blurrier than when they were just using the built-in zoom tools inside of Final Cut Pro. This is specifically an issue with how Final Cut Pro deals with Apple Motion templates. Unfortunately, it's dropping the resolution as it zooms in, so it's not going to have the full resolution of your original footage. However, this only applies to the titles, so there is a very simple fix, and that is just using the effects version. But just to show you how little the effect is, I am on a 1080p timeline. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom way in here, and you'll see that there is this subtle cut between the footage on the right and the footage on the left. The footage on the left is the ProZooms version, and the footage on the right is just the naturally zoomed version from Final Cut Pro. So you can see it's very, very subtle. If I go ahead and enable and disable that, you can see the blur is just a little bit more. If it's too noticeable for you, I strongly recommend that you take your ProZooms and go ahead and try out these sharpening tools. And you can see that I actually have the footage sharper than what was originally possible with Final Cut Pro's built-in zoom tools. So that was a complete overview of my ProZooms plugin. Again, if you haven't picked up ProZooms, there is a discount code down below. If this video was helpful to you, consider pressing that like button, and you may want to check out this video where I show you 3 powerful ways to zoom in Final Cut Pro, 2 of which don't even require a plugin. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.